You're listening to
They're gonna call it a hard foul. They're gonna call it a hard foul.
offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
Good morning, several listeners of the Hard Foul podcast, and welcome back as we are going to dive into the Boston Celtics with your host, Jim Quigley, and myself, Mike Quigley. It's been a really up and down week for the Celtics. They got into the play-in tournament and unfortunately lost on the road to the Indiana Pacers. But last night, a very entertaining game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Celtics came out flat, probably because they've had a lot of time off. Cleveland took an 18-4 lead, and Boston really just kept fighting. And then in that fourth quarter, it looks like Cleveland ran out of gas while the Celtics were locked in. Over the last couple of games, Jim, and we can spend some time on this today. I think the third quarter is still an area to talk about. The Celtics won the third quarter last night, but also gave up a 13-2 run. Obviously, the third quarter in Indiana was a problem, and I think it's more prevalent on the road than it is at home. An impressive win against Knicks as well, and obviously how the Celtics closed the last 4 minutes last night was impressive. And this look ahead, the Celtics schedule is pretty hard over the next couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how they do on some of these tough back-to-backs, these home and homes, and this road trip against really good Western Conference opponents. So I'll kick it off to wherever you want to start, Jim, and I will go from there.
Yeah, there really has been a lot that has happened. It's been a couple of weeks since we've done a pod, unfortunately, and want to apologize to the listeners for my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'll start. Last night, yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Slow start, but the way they were able to fight back, and I think these type of games are good for teams that want to win a title. They went 26 for 26 from the line. I think, what did they start off? 0 for 9 for 3-point line or something like that, and then ended up being over 40%. I thought the way they closed the game, particularly in the last 4 minutes, where they, I think it was a tie game or a 1-point game, and they pushed it to a 7-8 point lead. The defense really stepped up over those last 4 minutes, and they continued to get good looks. And the one time they didn't, when Tatum went into an ISO 3, they hustled and created a turnover when the Cavs had a fast break opportunity. So
that was huge.
They are just, at home, they've become a juggernaut. I know they give a 13-2 to run in the third quarter at home, but third quarter is really not a problem at home. They've outscored their opponents pretty significantly. Last night you would consider one of their closest games at home, and it's still a 7-point margin. It's not like it was a 1-possession game. So they have continued just to really just dominate, and I think that's a really good sign considering, how things have gone there in the playoffs the last couple of years. And I think it's a really good sign of a team that's, wants to do bigger things. Usually those teams really clean up at home, especially during the regular season, they make a statement. But I guess the bigger thing for me is I just want to look at a couple trends that, one is worrisome to me a little bit. And this league has really become about 3-point shooting. The Celtics lost. You can point to a lot of reasons why they lost to Miami, but more than anything else is they got killed from the 3-point line last year.
Yep.
In the conference finals. They got killed. And some of that was luck. Some of that was maybe they could have defended the line better. Some of that was them shooting very poorly, whatever, but they did not compete there. Against Indiana in the playing game, Indiana just outshot them. I was texting you the entire game when it was a 2-point game or a 4-point game. And I just kept saying the difference here is that Indiana's making their threes, and that's why they're staying in this thing. And the Celtics, were minus, continuously through that game. They were minus 12 or minus 15 from the 3-point line. And then last night, Cleveland's one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league, and they shoot well north of 40%, and that is a percentage that kind of dropped.
Yeah, when you're doing drop coverage against Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you let Max Strauss get loose. And I think there's a little bit, I don't think it's a huge alarm or concern right now, but they need to clean that up, how they're defending the three, because not all of this is over this season, over these last few games. It's just been bad luck. Some of it has been how they've defended that luck, is how they defended that three-point line, you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I definitely think, too, part of this is what we saw a lot of in Milwaukee over the years with the way they defended the three, with Coach Charles Lee being there, and I think we're seeing some of that this year. Last night, they didn't really make adjustments until like the last 4 minutes of that fourth quarter, but really they were allowing Garland and Mitchell to just pull up, really uncontested for most of the game, because they would come off that pick or they would come off a crossover, and Horford or Porzingis or Cornette, who was ever in the game, they would drop into the paint and not challenge a shot. And when they're hot as they are, like you have to switch up and do something different. Like you can't just have, these are my defensive principles, so I'm going to stick by them. I think that's stupid. That's stupid. I can't stand when teams operate like that. They were just killing you. And the two of them, it's like the hoop is bigger at the Garden than any other court in the NBA for them. But I think this is what we're going to see. I don't know how much better it's going to get because of the way the Celtics play defense now. Maybe I'm wrong, but they can make some slight adjustments to be better. But when you're going to defend the paint as much as they do, and they do a good job defending the paint, right? I think they're going to sacrifice the three-point shot, which I don't know how smart that is in today's game and how much I agree with that philosophy. I'm not a big fan of it.
Well, that was definitely the philosophy in Milwaukee. I thought earlier in the season they were getting over those screens pretty well. And, we talked about it, what they were doing in the preseason and the regular season, where it was absolutely a drop coverage, but you saw almost how Holiday and White were reading the offense and where those screens were coming, and they were able to get over those screens and get out on shooters or to stay with their man, pretty consistently. I think, and I don't know if it has something to do with Holiday being a little hobbled. We saw that happen at the end of the Knicks game. But, you definitely, I feel like there's been a bit of a difference where they seem to be switching a lot more again. And we're seeing a lot more of the, like you mentioned, that drop coverage and those Cleveland guards who are just able to, take advantage of it. Now, some of that could have been the game plan against Cleveland coming in. Their guards really have not shot the ball well at all this year. Garland included. They're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. So maybe, that was the game plan coming in, and Cleveland made them. But there's been a little bit of a trend with it. Even the Knicks in that first half shot the ball pretty well. The second half
the Orlando Magic shot the three well against the Celtics.
They did.
The Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
They don't shoot the three well against anybody.
So I do think that needs to be cleaned up. I think we saw at the beginning of the year that they're capable of doing it. So it'll be interesting to see what their approach is tomorrow night. The other thing that you hit on, Mike, and I think, I'd love to hear from you, but just the schedule. Not just it's hard coming up. It's been a difficult schedule to start.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, they played, I think, I want to say they're like 11-3 against the top 8 teams in the league right now, and you in the East, and you still have 3 more this week against Cleveland and Orlando.
Teams that traditionally kill the Celtics.
Yeah, really. And 11-3, you've cleaned up at home. You've definitely struggled on the road, but this is, you got these next 3 games and continuing out west. And I want to tie this back to the in-season tournament. So we obviously, as fans, wanted them to win. It would have been cool to see them play in Vegas. Do you think this was better for the team based off of how their schedule has been to start the season, that they didn't fly to Vegas, fly back to Boston, and then fly back out west, that's a lot of travel against a lot of good teams early in the year when you already have a tough schedule. Is this, by not making it, is it better for this team, health-wise and whatnot going forward?
Yeah, and I think the other part of it too is that I wasn't a fan of that teams would travel all the way to Vegas to play a game, and then it doesn't count on your standings.
Yeah.
For that last championship game. That is something the NBA should fix. That makes no sense to me. And part of me was relieved that the Celtics weren't doing that, because then you're playing the Lakers 3 times. And if you won that game, the chances of you winning the next 2 versus the Lakers and sweeping them 3-0 is really tough. So I just thought that was a stupid part of it. And I don't understand now, like the Knicks got screwed. The Knicks have to play the Celtics 5 times.
I know.
Because of that, how is that fair? That's not fair. That's ridiculous. And obviously this year the Knicks can't figure out the Celtics. So it's possible they could go 0-5, and that for a team that has playoff aspirations, that could kick them into the play-in. And so I agree. Yeah, I think in hindsight it would have been fun, but it's probably better. And to your point about the Celtics schedule, it's funny, like how hard it's been and how hard it's going to be. You would think in the second half there's going to be some easier games, because I was looking at Philly's schedule. After this week, they're going to have played Washington, the Hornets, and there's another team I'm missing, another horrible team. Who am I missing, Jim? Washington, the Hornets. Who's another really bad basketball team?
Detroit's on
Detroit.
That.
Yeah, they're doing Detroit play.
Yeah, Memphis.
10 games.
Yeah.
10 games versus those 3 teams. So you can only imagine what Philly's schedule is going to look like after the All-Star break. But yeah, this is a tough stretch. And the Celtics traditionally, no matter who the opponent is in these home and homes, they don't win both of them. They usually go 1-1. That's going to be a real challenge for them to keep this undefeated streak going at home. I think Thursday night's going to be really tough. Then they got Friday night back-to-back with Orlando, and then a Sunday afternoon game before they fly out. And then when you look at that West Coast, they play their last game before they fly out is Christmas.
Yeah.
So that's the end of their West Coast trip.
Oh yeah.
And I know we're all excited for that LA game, but we might have a tired, hobbled Celtics team that doesn't show up on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
it's just human nature to think that that's going to happen.
It might. It's also under the spotlight for a team that you're going up against LeBron. You anticipate them being up for that regardless. You don't know how they're gonna adjust, how they're gonna feel. I do think, you talk about these next 3. Hopefully, we can see them go 2-1, and continue this streak, or even go undefeated. I think for this team, where they want to go, when you have these back-to-back kind of playoff situations, I think this week you'd want to see at least 3-1. But yeah, the schedule is tough. Maybe it'll bode well if they continue to win. They're 17-5 right now, 18-5, 17-5. So if they continue to win, you should have a soft second half of the schedule of the season where they should be able to eat and take advantage and do well. But yeah, no, I think if they can go 3-1, that would be a good way to end this week. But Mike, why don't we end this on just a couple of player thoughts?
Sure.
First.
Yeah, and Jim, I think there's a good possibility this 3-1 could happen, and the one loss that they're going to have is on Sunday afternoon when me and you go to the game.
Yeah, the
last game before a road trip on a matinee on a Sunday.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case.
Yeah. So I did want to touch just last night. I thought that a big part of the reason the Celtics were able to dig themselves out of this hole was Peyton Pritchard. He came in, he hit the first 3 of the game, which was big to get them going. And then he hit a corner 3 in that quarter as well. That got him within 2 points. And I think just his shooting spread the floor as well, where it was just in that first quarter, it was just Jaylen Brown who was for the start of the game, there's only one guy for the first half of that quarter that scored for the Celtics. It was Jaylen Brown. That's how bad things were. And then the second half, I thought we saw more of that when Pritchard came into the game. Hauser was part of this too, but I think it was more Pritchard last night. His on the ball defense in that third quarter. So the Celtics gave up that 13-2 run, came out of a timeout, threw the ball out of bounds. Next possession came down. Tatum dribbled off his leg. Luckily, the defense picked up, and it wasn't a 17-2 run. But the bench came in, and that was a big part in the first half and the second half with their shooting that got the Celtics in that game. And then at the beginning of the fourth quarter, the Celtics stayed in the game with Jaylen Brown and the bench unit in. And so I just think overall, Pritchard had a really tough start to the season. He's really picked it up since then. And his shooting, I don't know what his shooting numbers look like. I'm just assuming over the last month or so that he's got to be shooting like close to 50% from three. So it's been really impactful for them.
Yeah, he started off the season like 3 for 17, so he's really got him going. And then Hauser, I mean, his confidence right now and his shot is just through the roof. And he's shooting it. You see he's shooting it off on the move, or he'll, even go to the dribble. He even like fades away a little bit. He is just. It's almost like a shock when it doesn't go in now, and it's just it's an interesting shot to watch too, because it's kind of high arcing and that doesn't hit any rim at all. It doesn't really feels like it hits the net, and so soft going right through. So, the way he's shooting, and it's been a while now too. It's been a while now, and I know he had a run like this a little bit last year, but I feel like it just feels more confidence in his game overall and his shooting. The last thing I want to hit on, Mike, I don't know if you caught this. Jason Tatum was on Evan Turner's podcast, and they asked him a bunch of things, but one of the things that stood out to me, just because it used to be a storyline here, and it really hasn't been anymore, but they asked him about Boston, and he talked about initially how he hated Boston, because he blamed the Patriots for the reason the Rams left for beating them in 2001, and the Kobe
That's funny.
and the Celtics. So it was a sports hatred, which I actually really respect. And then he talks about how much he loves it here now and how it's home, and how much winning is important here, and just not winning games and winning the championship. And you're not really mentioned with the great Celtics unless you do that, and how much that means to him to want, and there's nowhere else he wants to be. And you've heard Brown talk about wanting to be here in the city as well. It's just it's nice to hear a guy as young as they are in a league where it feels like superstars hedge their comments about where they are, right? Where they're playing consistently and constantly. And I know he still has another year before he can sign his extension, but he's not being shy about where he wants to be, and I don't feel like we're going to go into this extension with, questions about whether or not he wants to stay here or not. And he's just
not saying no to that money.
Yeah, well, it's not.
No way.
No,
but it's not about the money. I'm just saying. Yeah.
It's always about the money, but it's always about the money. But I do feel like, all things being equal, he wants to finish the job here, and I don't know if that's has to do with kind of how he was raised. I'm sure it has a lot to do with that. His mom being a single mom and going through law school, and that kind of finish your job type thing mentality that they must have in that family. But there was other parts of that conversation that were really interesting too, just about how he wants to raise his kid, and he really does just come across as a bright, introspective kid. Yeah, young man. Yeah, and it's nice to hear that he wants to be here. That's all. That's
all the time he comes off that way, doesn't he? Like
he does, yeah.
Anytime you hear him speak, I remember there was something over the summer. I don't know if he's at a basketball camp or whatever. He's talking to youth about why he plays every day. why he doesn't take games off, and really it was about the fans.
Yeah,
You know, he was
yeah.
just saying,
He got into that too. Yeah, I really, that's part of the game you have to respect, because again, in the league, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they take games off, and they do it to ensure. But
the way he put it though is because I would get on Tatum for not taking games off. I would say you need to, right? You need to play less minutes. But just in hearing him speak and say, these people are paying for tickets to see me, and some of them, this is like a really big deal to pay for that ticket. I need to be out there. He goes, I only go to whatever city, Phoenix, once a year.
Yeah.
And if I don't play that game, they don't get to see me play. I have a lot of respect for him, and we're lucky to have him here. And I hope he gets his championship. I really do. I'm rooting for him. I want it really bad for him because he's a really easy superstar to root for. So, yeah, it sounds like an interesting podcast.
Yeah, it was. It was good. And the last thing I'll say, the other thing he talked about is how much he just loves the game, and which you would expect. But I don't think in pro sports that